The lights dimmed in the studio and the crowd erupted into cheers as the band played the familiar theme song. It was another episode of The Late Night Buzz, one of the most popular talk shows on television. The host, a comedian known for his quick wit and biting humor, took center stage with his usual swagger. He waved to the audience, soaking up their energy before diving straight into the opening monologue. Jokes about politicians, trending memes, and celebrity gossip flew fast and furious, keeping everyone entertained. But tonight, there was something, or rather, someone, special, waiting in the wings. Keanu Reeves, the man behind some of the biggest action movies of all time, had agreed to sit down for an interview. He wasn't the kind of star who regularly graced late-night couches. In fact, Keanu preferred staying out of the limelight when he wasn't working. Yet here he was, walking through the studio doors dressed casually but effortlessly cool in his signature leather jacket and boots. His presence alone brought a certain mystique to the show. People loved him not just because of his roles in blockbusters like John Wick or cult classics like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but also because of the quiet humility that seemed to follow him everywhere. Backstage, the production team buzzed with excitement. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the actor who had managed to stay grounded despite decades in Hollywood. Even the host admitted to being a fan, though his writers were busy sharpening their pens for what they hoped would be the funniest segment of the season. You see, this particular talk show was famous, or infamous, for its roasts. The host didn't hold back when it came to teasing guests, often crossing the line between playful banter and outright mockery. Some celebrities laughed along, others left feeling embarrassed. Tonight, the writers were determined to get under Keanu's skin. After all, how could someone so reserved handle jokes about his career choices or his notoriously private personal life? As Keanu prepared for his big moment, a producer approached him with a warning. "Just so you know," she said gently, "he likes to push buttons. Don't let him get to you." Keanu listened patiently, nodding without saying much. When she finished, he simply smiled and replied, "It'll be fine." That response was classic Keanu, calm, collected, and unfazed by whatever might come his way. Little did anyone know, however, that this night would take an unexpected turn thanks to another guest who happened to be booked for the same episode. Enter Steven Seagal. Yes, the martial arts legend and former action hero, whose heyday may have passed but whose larger-than-life persona remained intact. Seagal hadn't done many interviews recently, preferring to focus on music and other ventures, so his appearance on the show was already generating buzz. What no one realized at the time was that having both Keanu and Seagal on the same stage would create a dynamic unlike anything viewers had ever seen. When the cameras finally rolled and the host introduced Keanu, the applause was deafening. Fans adored him, and even those who weren't die-hard movie buffs respected him. As Keanu walked onto the set, waving shyly at the cheering crowd, the host greeted him warmly. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. They talked about Keanu's latest projects, his thoughts on fame, and even shared a laugh over his iconic role as Neo in The Matrix. But then, the tone began to shift. The host started making jokes about Keanu's acting style, calling him the guy who looks like he's thinking really hard while staring into space. At first, the comments were lighthearted, and the audience chuckled along. Keanu responded with grace, nodding and even laughing at himself. But as the host grew bolder, the jokes became more pointed. He made cracks about Keanu's choice of roles over the years, suggesting that maybe he was stuck trying to figure out who he really was. The laughter in the room grew quieter, replaced by an awkward tension. And just when it felt like things couldn't get any worse, Steven Seagal stepped onto the stage. Clad in his trademark black outfit, he exuded confidence and authority. No one knew it yet, but his arrival would change the course of the evening and leave a lasting impression on everyone watching. The energy in the studio shifted the moment Steven Seagal walked onto the stage. Dressed head to toe in black, his long hair tied back neatly, he carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. The audience erupted into applause, though it was a mix of genuine excitement and polite curiosity. Some people cheered because they remembered Seagal from his action-packed heyday, movies like Above the Law and Under Siege. Others clapped because, well, it's not every day you see someone like him on a late-night talk show anymore. His presence felt almost mythical, as if he'd stepped straight out of one of his old films. The host tried to keep things light, introducing Seagal with a joke about how martial arts legends never really retire. They just wait for the perfect moment to strike. It got a chuckle from the crowd, but there was something different about the way Seagal responded. He didn't play, along with the usual banter or laugh too hard at the host's quips. Instead, he gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable, and took his seat next to Keanu. For a brief moment, the two actors exchanged a glance, a subtle nod of acknowledgement that went unnoticed by most of the audience, but spoke volumes between them. Back on track, the host turned his attention back to Keanu, clearly trying to steer the conversation away from whatever awkwardness had started brewing earlier. But now, with Seagal sitting right there, the dynamic had changed. Every word the host said felt heavier, as if he was suddenly aware of being watched more closely, not just by the audience, but by someone who wasn't afraid to call him out. So, Keanu, the host began again, leaning forward with a smirk. Let's talk about your journey. You've been around forever, right? Like, people say you're cool, but honestly, he paused dramatically, letting the tension build before delivering what he thought would be another clever jab. Isn't your career kind of, I don't know, one long existential crisis? First, you're this goofy kid in Bill and Ted. Then, you're saving the world in The Matrix, and now you're killing everyone in John Wick. Are you trying to prove something to us? Or yourself? The room fell silent. The host grinned, clearly proud of his punchline, but the reaction he expected never came. The audience hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or cringe. A few nervous giggles rippled through the crowd, but for the most part, it felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see how Keanu would respond. Keanu didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes meeting the host's gaze without a trace of anger or defensiveness. With his trademark calmness, he replied, I think we all have our journeys, Mark. Maybe yours will surprise you someday. The simplicity of his answer was striking. There was no bitterness, no attempt to fight back. It was almost like he saw the insult coming and had already decided it wasn't worth engaging with. His tone was measured, almost philosophical, leaving the host momentarily speechless. Seagal, who had been quietly observing everything up until this point, finally spoke up. That's deep, he said, his voice low and deliberate. Sounds like wisdom to me. His comment drew a few scattered laughs from the audience, but it also served as a subtle reminder that he was paying close attention, and that maybe the host wasn't the only one running the show tonight. Unfazed, the host attempted to recover by turning his focus to Seagal. All right, he said, forcing a laugh. Let's bring you into this. Between the two of you, it seems like Hollywood forgot what to do with its action heroes. Am I wrong? For a split second, Seagal's face remained completely neutral. Then, slowly, he raised an eyebrow. Is that so? He asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Funny, because I don't recall seeing many comedians getting invited to the Oscars lately either. The audience erupted into laughter, louder and more genuine than anything they'd heard all night. The host froze, caught off guard by the unexpected comeback. He stammered for a moment, trying to regain control of the situation, but the damage was done. Seagal's words weren't just funny, they were sharp, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. By pointing out the host's own insecurities, he flipped the script entirely, turning the tables in a way that left everyone reeling. Keanu, still seated calmly beside him, couldn't help but crack a small smile. It wasn't smug or triumphant, just a quiet acknowledgement of the moment. For years, Keanu had been the subject of jokes, both good-natured and cruel. People often misunderstood his reserved demeanor, mistaking it for aloofness or disinterest. But those who truly knew him understood that beneath the surface lay a man of incredible depth and resilience. And tonight, thanks to Seagal's intervention, the world was getting a glimpse of that strength. Meanwhile, the host scrambled to pivot away from the awkwardness. He threw out a few more questions, attempting to steer the conversation toward safer topics like upcoming projects or hobbies. But the rhythm of the interview had been irrevocably altered. The playful banter he usually relied on now felt forced, and the chemistry between the three men on stage was undeniably tense. Seagal, however, seemed perfectly content to let the silence linger. He sat upright in his chair, exuding a quiet authority that demanded respect. Every movement he made, from adjusting his glasses to crossing his arms, felt deliberate, as if he were sending a message without saying a word. The message was clear. He wasn't here to entertain anyone at the expense of his dignity or Keanu's. As the segment continued, the host grew increasingly uneasy. His attempts to lighten the mood fell flat, and the audience's reactions became harder to predict. Some laughed nervously while others sat stone-faced, sensing the shift in power dynamics. What had started as a routine episode of the late-night buzz had transformed into something far more compelling. An unscripted battle of wits and egos, with Keanu and Seagal emerging as unlikely allies against the very man who had invited them onto the show. By the time the commercial break rolled around, the tension in the studio was palpable. Backstage crew members whispered among themselves, speculating about how the rest of the night would unfold. Would the host manage to salvage the interview? Or would Seagal deliver another knockout blow when the cameras returned? One thing was certain. No one watching at home would forget this episode anytime soon. When the cameras rolled again after the commercial break, the atmosphere in the studio felt heavier than before. The host tried to mask his discomfort with a forced smile and a joke about how even action heroes need bathroom breaks. It got a polite laugh from the audience, but it was clear that the earlier tension hadn't dissolved, it had only thickened. Seagal leaned forward slightly in his chair, his piercing gaze fixed on the host. The man who once dominated movie screens with his martial arts prowess wasn't here to entertain or play along. He was here to make a point. And as the host fumbled through another question, this time aimed at Seagal himself, it became obvious that the comedian was walking on thin ice. "So, Stephen," the host began, attempting to sound casual, "you've been, keeping busy, huh? Music, movies, all sorts of stuff. How's life treating you these days?" Seagal didn't answer immediately. He took a slow breath, his expression unreadable. Then in his deep, gravelly voice he said, "Life is good when you focus on what matters. Respect, integrity, purpose. Those things don't fade, no matter how much time passes." The simplicity of his words hit like a punch. They weren't rehearsed or flashy. They were raw and honest, the kind of statement that makes people stop and think. The audience sat quietly, absorbing every syllable. Even the host seemed momentarily stunned, unsure how to respond. For someone used to controlling the narrative, this sudden shift in power dynamics must have felt unsettling. But Seagal wasn't done yet. After a brief pause, he added, "And let me tell you something else. Mocking someone for their choices, whether it's their career, their art, or their personal life, is easy. What's hard is showing respect. Respect for the work they put in, the risks they took, and the lives they touched." The room went silent. Not the awkward silence that had filled the air earlier, but a profound stillness. The kind that happens when someone says something so true that it resonates deep within you. The host froze, his pen hovering over the note cards on his desk. His writers had prepared dozens of jokes for tonight's episode, but none of them could prepare him for this moment. Keanu, sitting quietly beside Seagal, looked down at his hands for a moment, then raised his head and offered a small nod of gratitude. There was no need for words between the two men. They understood each other perfectly. Both had faced criticism throughout their careers, often unfairly. Both had learned to rise above negativity and stay true to themselves. And now, in this unlikely alliance, they were standing together against a force neither of them particularly cared for. Mockery disguised as humor. The host finally managed to speak, though his usual bravado was noticeably absent. "Wow, okay," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's heavy. But I guess we can all agree on respecting each other, right?" He glanced nervously at the audience, hoping for some sort of validation. Instead, he was met with blank stares and quiet murmurs. People weren't buying it anymore. Seagal, sensing the opening, pressed further. "You know," he continued, his tone steady and deliberate, "a lot of people think fame is about being liked or getting attention. But real success isn't measured by applause. It's measured by impact, by leaving something behind that lasts longer than the spotlight." The audience erupted into applause this time, not the scattered, hesitant clapping from earlier, but a thunderous ovation. Some even stood up cheering for Seagal's words. It was as if the entire room had been waiting for someone to say exactly what he'd just said. In a world where social media thrives on tearing others down, and late-night shows often blur the line between comedy and cruelty, Seagal's message felt refreshingly human. Keanu chimed in softly, breaking his silence. "I think Steven's right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're all just trying to do our best. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail. But the important thing is to keep moving forward, to keep creating, learning, growing." The contrast between the two guests and the host couldn't have been starker. While Keanu spoke with quiet humility and Seagal with commanding authority, the host looked increasingly out of place. His attempts to lighten the mood with another quip fell flat, drowned out by the sincerity of the moment. The audience wasn't interested in jokes anymore. They wanted authenticity, and they were getting it in spades. As the segment wore on, the host struggled to regain control. He asked a few more questions, mostly superficial ones about upcoming projects and hobbies. But the energy in the room had shifted permanently. Keanu and Seagal responded politely, but their answers carried an unspoken weight. Every word they spoke felt deliberate, rooted in experience and wisdom. Meanwhile, the host's usual charm seemed shallow and performative by comparison. By the time the interview wrapped up, the audience was buzzing with excitement. As soon as the cameras cut, people started whispering among themselves, replaying the highlights in their minds. Social media lit up instantly with clips of Seagal's mic drop moment going viral within minutes. Fans praised him for standing up for Keanu, while others criticized the host for crossing a line. Memes flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, turning the episode into a cultural phenomenon overnight. Backstage, Keanu and Seagal shared a quiet moment together. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Their mutual respect spoke volumes. As they parted ways, Keanu gave Seagal a firm handshake and a sincere thank you. Seagal simply nodded, his expression softening for the first time that night. For the host, however, the evening ended on a sobering note. As he walked off stage, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd underestimated both his guests and perhaps himself. The man known for making others squirm had been the one left speechless, and the lesson wouldn't be lost on him. Respect, as Seagal had pointed out, wasn't something to be taken lightly. And sometimes, the hardest truths come from the most unexpected places. Little did anyone know this single episode would spark conversations far beyond the confines of the studio. It reminded viewers that kindness and integrity still mattered, even in an era dominated by cynicism and snark. And for Keanu and Seagal, it was proof that staying true to yourself doesn't just earn admiration, it inspires others to do the same. The moment the cameras stopped rolling, the studio erupted into a flurry of activity. The audience was still buzzing, some people clapping enthusiastically while others leaned over to whisper excitedly to their neighbors. Backstage crew members scrambled to reset for the next segment, but the real drama unfolded behind the scenes. Keanu and Seagal were already making their way toward the green room, leaving the host standing awkwardly on stage, unsure of what had just happened. For the host, it wasn't just another night at work. It felt like a reckoning. He prided himself on being quick-witted and sharp-tongued, qualities that had earned him millions of viewers and a reputation as one of the edgiest late-night personalities around. But tonight, something was different. Instead of walking away feeling victorious, he felt exposed, as though his carefully crafted persona had been stripped bare in front of everyone watching. As he stood there staring at the empty chairs where Keanu and Seagal had sat moments ago, the weight of Seagal's words sank in deeper. Mocking someone for their choices is easy. What's hard is showing respect. It wasn't just a jab, it was a mirror held up to his own behavior. reflecting back everything he didn't want to see. For years, he'd justified his jokes as harmless fun, part of the game of late-night television. But now, faced with two men who carried themselves with quiet dignity, he realized how hollow those excuses sounded. Meanwhile, backstage, Keanu and Seagal shared a quiet moment away from the chaos. A production assistant offered them water bottles, which they accepted with polite nods. Neither man said much. They didn't need to. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forged not just by their shared experiences in Hollywood, but by the mutual respect they showed each other in the face of adversity. Keanu broke the silence first. "Thanks for stepping in back there," he said softly, glancing at Seagal. His tone wasn't emotional or overly dramatic. It was simple, genuine. "I didn't expect that." Seagal shrugged, his expression calm but serious. "You don't deserve that kind of treatment," he replied. "Not from him, not from anyone. You've done too much for this industry to be treated like a punchline." Keanu smiled faintly, shaking his head. "It comes with the territory, I guess. People think because I don't react, it means I don't care. But sometimes, it's better to let things slide." Seagal raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the couch. "That's noble, sure. But letting people walk all over you doesn't make you strong. It makes them weaker. And trust me, I've seen enough weak people in my time." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Keanu chuckled lightly, clearly amused by Seagal's bluntness. "Well, either way, I appreciate it. Not many people would have stepped up like that." Seagal waved off the compliment with a dismissive gesture. "It's not about me. It's about setting an example. If we let people treat us like garbage, they'll do the same to everyone else. Respect has to start somewhere." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A producer peeked her head in, reminding them that they were due back on set for the closing segment. Both men nodded, finishing their drinks before heading out. As they walked side by side down the narrow hallway, the contrast between them couldn't have been more striking. Keanu moved with his usual quiet grace, almost blending into the background despite his fame. Seagal, on the other hand, commanded attention without even trying. Every step he took seemed deliberate, every movement calculated. Yet somehow they complemented each other perfectly, two sides of the same coin, united by a shared sense of purpose. Back on stage, the host was doing his best to recover. He introduced the final segment, a musical performance with forced enthusiasm, cracking a few self-deprecating jokes about getting schooled by action heroes. The audience laughed politely, but it was clear that the mood had shifted permanently. Gone was the playful energy of earlier. Instead, there was a lingering tension, a sense that something significant had just transpired. After the show wrapped, the host retreated to his dressing room, closing the door firmly behind him. He slumped into a chair, running a hand through his hair as he replayed the events of the evening in his mind. Clips of Seagal's comments looped endlessly on social media, accompanied by hashtags like Respect Matters and Stand Up for Others. Fans were divided. Some defended the host, arguing that comedy should push boundaries, while others praised Keanu and Seagal for handling the situation with class and integrity. Sitting alone in the dimly lit room, the host scrolled through Twitter, reading comment after comment. One tweet stood out: "Comedy can challenge norms without tearing people down. Tonight proved that." It stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. For the first time in years, he questioned whether his approach to humor was really worth the cost. Was it possible to entertain without alienating, to provoke thought without causing harm? The next morning, news outlets picked up the story, turning it into a cultural talking point. Headlines ranged from "Steven Seagal delivers epic burn on late-night host" to "Keanu Reeves proves grace under fire." Clips of the interview dominated morning shows and podcasts, sparking debates about the role of comedy in modern society. Some argued that the host had gone too far, using his platform to belittle rather than uplift. Others pointed out that celebrities knew what they were signing up for when they agreed to appear on talk shows. Either way, the incident sparked a larger conversation about accountability and empathy in entertainment. For Keanu, The aftermath was relatively low-key. True to form, he avoided addressing the controversy directly, choosing instead to focus on his work. In interviews later that week, he spoke briefly about the importance of kindness and staying grounded, reinforcing the values he lived by. Fans admired him even more for refusing to engage in pettiness, seeing him as a beacon of humility in an often cutthroat industry. Seagal, on the other hand, embraced the spotlight. He gave a handful of follow-up interviews, expanding on his thoughts about respect and integrity. "We're living in a world where negativity sells," he told one reporter, "but that doesn't mean we have to buy into it. We can choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. That's real power." His comments resonated deeply, earning him renewed admiration from fans old and new. Suddenly, people were revisiting his films, listening to his music, and rediscovering the man behind the mystique. While some critics dismissed his remarks as overly philosophical, others saw them as a timely reminder of what truly matters. As for the host, the experience left a lasting impression. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began to emerge in his hosting style. His jokes became less biting, more thoughtful. He started inviting guests known for their activism and advocacy, shifting the tone of his show toward meaningful conversations rather than cheap laughs. It wasn't a complete overhaul. He was still a comedian at heart, but it was a step in the right direction. Looking back, the episode became a turning point not just for the individuals involved, but for the broader culture surrounding late-night television. It reminded everyone that words matter, that actions have consequences, and that even the most unlikely alliances can inspire change. And for Keanu and Seagal, it was proof that staying true to yourself isn't just admirable, it's revolutionary. The weeks following that unforgettable episode of The Late Night Buzz felt like a whirlwind for everyone involved. For the host, it was a period of introspection and recalibration. He couldn't escape the aftermath, not just because of the viral clips circulating online, but because the incident had struck a nerve within him. It wasn't easy to admit, even to himself, but he'd underestimated Keanu and Seagal. Their quiet strength and unwavering dignity had exposed something raw in him, his own insecurities masked as humor. At first, he tried to brush it off, telling friends and colleagues that these things happen and it's all part of the job. But deep down, he knew better. The comments flooding social media weren't just criticism, they were reflections of a larger issue. People were tired of cruelty disguised as comedy. They wanted authenticity, connection, and respect. And while the host had built his career on sharp wit and biting remarks, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was room for growth. So he began making small changes. During pre-show meetings with writers, he started pushing back on jokes that felt unnecessarily harsh or mean-spirited. At first, the team resisted. They were used to crafting punchlines designed to shock. But over time, they adapted. Slowly, the tone of the show shifted. Instead of relying solely on mocking guests, the host began asking thoughtful questions, allowing conversations to unfold naturally. There were still laughs, of course, but they came from genuine moments rather than manufactured tension. Audiences noticed the difference almost immediately. Ratings initially dipped, a predictable reaction after such a polarizing episode. But soon, viewers began returning in droves. This new version of the show resonated with them. It wasn't perfect, and the host still stumbled occasionally, reverting to old habits. But his willingness to learn and evolve earned him a second chance. In the eyes of many, some fans even praised him for having the courage to change, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to step out of his comfort zone. For Keanu, life carried on much as it always did. He didn't give interviews about the incident, nor did he fuel the ongoing debates about late-night comedy. To him, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was simply another moment in a long journey filled with highs and lows. What mattered most was staying true to himself, no matter the circumstances. That quiet resolve continued to inspire those around him, whether they were collaborators, fans, or casual observers. Behind the scenes, however, Keanu's actions spoke volumes. After the show, he sent a handwritten note to the host, thanking him for the opportunity to appear on the program. It wasn't an olive branch so much as a gesture of goodwill, a reminder that kindness could bridge even the widest gaps. The host kept the note tucked inside his desk drawer, pulling it out whenever self-doubt crept in. Those few sentences became a source of motivation, urging him to keep moving forward despite the challenges. Seagal, meanwhile, found himself thrust into the spotlight once again. The interview reignited interest in his career, leading to new opportunities in music, film, and even motivational speaking. Fans marveled at how effortlessly he delivered his now famous line. Mocking someone for their choices is easy. What's hard is showing respect. It became a rallying cry for anyone who believed in standing up against negativity, no matter the context. In interviews, Seagal elaborated on his philosophy, emphasizing the importance of integrity and accountability. "We live in a world where people are quick to judge," he said during one appearance. "But judgment doesn't define us. It reveals who we are. If you want to make a difference, start by treating others the way you'd want to be treated. Simple as that." His words struck a chord resonating far beyond the confines of Hollywood. Teachers used them in classrooms to discuss empathy. Parents shared them with their kids to teach values. Even corporations incorporated them into training sessions about workplace culture. Seagal may not have intended to become a voice for positivity, but his message transcended entertainment, touching lives in ways he never anticipated. As months passed, the ripple effects of that single episode continued to spread. Late-night talk shows across the country began reevaluating their formats, prioritizing meaningful conversations over cheap laughs. Guests who might have avoided such programs in the past, authors, activists, scientists, started appearing more frequently, bringing fresh perspectives to audiences eager for substance over spectacle. Comedy didn't disappear entirely, of course. Laughter remained a vital part of human connection. But it evolved, becoming sharper, kinder, and more inclusive. For the host, the experience served as a turning point both professionally and personally. He learned that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. By admitting his mistakes and striving to improve, he earned back not only the trust of his audience but also his own self-respect. His relationship with his guests improved too. Where once they might have approached the show with apprehension, they now arrived knowing they'd be treated fairly. Some even thanked him afterward, appreciating the effort he put into creating a positive environment. Keanu and Seagal crossed paths again months later at a charity event. Neither made a big deal about their shared history, though they exchanged warm smiles and a firm handshake. Their bond, forged under unusual circumstances, remained unspoken yet undeniable. Both men understood that sometimes the smallest gestures, whether it's standing up for someone or extending grace, can leave the biggest impact. Looking back, that night on The Late Night Buzz became more than just a memorable episode. It was a lesson in humanity, reminding everyone involved and everyone watching that respect costs nothing but means everything. It showed that even in moments of conflict, there's always an opportunity for growth. And perhaps most importantly, it proved that when people choose kindness over cruelty, they create ripples of change that extend far beyond themselves. Years later, the story would still come up in interviews, articles, and casual conversations. For some, it was a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating others. For others, it was an inspiring example of how resilience and integrity can triumph over adversity. But for everyone who witnessed it, directly or indirectly, it was a powerful reminder of what truly matters: treating each other with dignity, compassion, and respect. And in a world often dominated by noise and negativity, that message continues to shine brightly, a beacon of hope guiding us toward a better way of being.